I get DMs sometimes when my name used to be on the M2. They'd be like, "Oh, that was so sick, blah, blah," and I'm at home working. And I'm like, "What's going on?" They're like, "That race, like, your M2 is so sick." I'm like, "You just raced my mom and lost." Like, it started probably when I was, like, 6, but more, like, obviously in depth was when I was older, saving up for my first car. I really wanted a C250 coupe for some reason. I thought that was, like, the prettiest car. It still is, like, all the W204s, C63s are gorgeous, especially Black Series is, like, beautiful. But yeah, that was my first car, but when I was 6, my dad was supposed to, go get a big SUV family, I think it was like a Lexus or something. He was driving me to school and he was like telling me about his dream car. And later that day, my mom had to pick me up and I was like, why can't dad get his dream car? And she was pissed, She's like, what are you telling our kid? And he's like, well, I've always wanted a 911. And she's like, I swear to God, if you go out to the dealership tomorrow and you don't come home with your dream car after telling your daughter, like, this is your dream, don't come home, She's like, "You go and get whatever it is. I don't care if it bankrupts you," She's like, "Go, you do not, like, crush our little kid's dreams right now." So, he ended up coming home in this, like, little car that looks like a toy to me because 'cause I'm 6. I'm expecting, the Lexus with the massage seats. I'm about to ride to school in, like, total luxury at the time. Like, that was, like, the big thing. He comes home in this 911. It was a Targa. It was I think a 997. And he comes home in it, and I'm like, "Why would you get this? This is a dream car? Like, this isn't cool," I'm like I'm 6, I'm like, "This is a Barbie car?" And he's like, "Alright, well, let's go for a little ride." And so he takes me on the on-ramp on the freeway by our house and just floors it, and I had never been in, like, a fast car. And I'm like, "This is so fu" I'm, like, screaming, I'm so happy, like, this is, like, the best thing ever, and he looks at me and goes, "Don't tell mom." And so, like, that was, like, our little thing. So I made him drive me to school every day in that car, and it was, like, kind of our, like, little fun thing. So he would take me to school every day in it, and then I think it was, like, I was 14, and I was, like, starting to already think about, like, what I wanted as my first car. And he's like, "Well, it's up to you. You gotta work for it. You gotta learn how to take care of your bills and everything like that." I'm like, "I'm 14, I can't even work." And he's like, "Well, you can start." So I was working under his office assistant, answering phones and just like taking appointments and stuff like that. And so obviously he would take me to work with him and then I'd go home with him. So I was there like the whole day. And during lunch, we would just sit and watch Jay Leno's Garage. And that was the only thing I've ever watched on YouTube because I'm never on YouTube. We would watch Jay Leno's Garage, and I was like, "I want a car." And so that's kinda, like, where everything started was rides to school in a 911. But yeah, and then Jay Leno's Garage is where I kinda, like, learned a lot. So I went overseas for other stuff that I wanted to do when I grew up, which I no longer want to do. I came home and I was like, "Well, what am I gonna do?" Like, I don't have any set plan. I don't know where I wanna go now, so I came back home and I was splitting my dad's lease payment on a Jaguar F-Type. And I was going to, like, these weekly little local car meets and stuff like that, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun. I want one of my own." So I went and I bought a M340. Nobody knew I was a girl when I started my Instagram page, and I made it, I think it was Quiet G20. It literally started with a muffler cut, like, to cut triangles in my exhaust, and because I didn't wanna pay for parts, because I was just like, "I put all this money into this car, I don't wanna put, all this money that's not gonna residualize into the car." And people were like, "Oh, you need wheels for it." So I reached out to, like, 3 different companies that were, like, on the top of my list, and I was like, "Hey, I just got this car, it's one of the first ones, here. Is there something that I can do for you in exchange for a set of wheels?" That way I didn't have to pay for it. And I landed my first sponsorship at 700 followers. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you get free stuff because 'cause you're a girl," and it's like, I reach out to brands and I'm like, "What can I do for you?" And I never, like, try to monetize off being just a girl in the car community because I feel like it's not really the best play, I guess, is being like, "Oh, I can do it too." But so that's kinda how I started, and then I started getting reached out to by other companies, and I was like, "I feel like this is something I could do as, like, a little hobby and pay for itself." I started 2.5 years ago, roughly. I've worked with about 50 brands, and then obviously it's now branched out more into everything, lifestyle, cars. So I've worked with modeling agencies now, I've worked with publishings, everything. Stuff that's not even automotive brands, like clothing companies and all that stuff. Gold Rush was actually really funny. I know one of the guys that helps run it, Brandon. Gold Rush happened, what, a couple months ago? And I think like a month or 2 before that, I got a call and Brandon was like, "Hey, you wanna come on Gold Rush? Just join us, have a good time, and help out where you can, and let's have a good 10 days." And I was like, "See you in 2 months." Like, so it was really good for, like, networking and everything like that, and it was something that I always wanted to be a part of, so it was really cool to go and experience that. A lot of people actually with more followings than me, like huge followings, will actually DM me or reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, how do you land so many brand deals? Like, this is insane. You have like such a small following compared to me." And I think it's just the way that I present myself online. I'm like, I'm not, wearing dental floss and spread across my car. I try to keep it very classy, something that you can show your mom and be like, "Hey, like, check out this girl," and not her be like, "What are you looking at?" But it's also, when I send out my brand emails and stuff like that, I mostly try to word it like, "What can I do for you in exchange?" Like, not just, "Hey, I have X amount of followers and this much reach, give me something." I'm like, "Hey, I have this much reach. This is my average impressions. This is my average views. This is, like, how I typically do for other companies. This is how much I've increased this company's sales. How can I help you increase your sales in exchange for product and some money?" Billstrine's probably one of my biggest sponsors. They actually reached out to me. They DM'd me on Instagram and were like, "Hey, like, let's do something." And they've given me about 5 or 6 suspensions by now. And I mean, they're like the top of the line, like the club sports and stuff like that. That's like thousands of dollars each set. And then they also pay me to travel. So they send me to like Moab for like an off-roading expo, or like I'm trying to go to Germany, stuff like that. I am a girl, so I have a shopping addiction, obviously. Kind of works out. So I got them 340 and I was like, I really like it. I did everything that I could do to it. I mean, that thing was like totally on it was literally on meth. So it was like it was done and I was like, I want something else. So then I got the M2. I came across the M2 and it was at a dealership and I went in just for a service on the M340 and the sales guy was like, "Oh, it's gorgeous. It'll work for you." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And my mom was with me and my mom was like, "Oh, it's beautiful." And if my mom tells me that she likes something, I'm like, "Alright, I got the approval, it's done, good idea," because mother knows best, so I just went for it and, got the M2, so I had both of those at the time, and the M2 actually got me way more sponsorships, and I was like, the cooler the car, the more sponsors I'm gonna get, you know? And then I had that fully built, I had a cool, like, little BMW bank livery on it, had all my sponsors on it, and I recently just sold it actually for more than I paid for it by, a good amount because it's market right now, and so I was like, "Well, what do I get now?" And that's when I got the M3, and, I have a couple other cars at home as well, just, like, for projects and stuff like that. The Jeep, I basically bought it to break it because I was like, "I'm so tired of driving these tiny, low cars everywhere," and in my town, it's obviously not, like, exotic car or sports car friendly, like, everybody has a Jeep or a truck. So I was like, "I want something that I can just, like, jump over curbs and, like, not go 2 miles an hour over a speed bump." So I got that, and that's also sponsored by Bilstein and a couple other, like, little local shops and stuff like that. And then the GT4 was kinda like a last minute impulse buy. I found it online, and it was at a dealership, like, 2 hours away, and I think it was a Sunday night, and I was sitting on the couch with my parents, and I was like, "I really wanna get a GT4, like, I think I really want one," and my dad, he's a big, big Porsche fan, and he was like, "That's, like, one of my dream cars, like, what makes you think about that?" And I was like, "Well, that's also one of the, obviously, influencing reasons," and my mom's, like, sitting on the couch, she's like, "Well, can you afford it? Like, let's crunch numbers," and she used to be a fleet manager at a dealership, so she was like, "Let's crunch the numbers, see what you can, if you can do it." So like, I think it was like an hour later, and I sent an email out and I was like, "Hey, I'm really interested in this car." My dad was like, "I'm off on Tuesdays. Like, I'll drive down with you so that you have a ride back if you don't get it." And I was like, "No, you want to see this car," because he was obviously excited. And we get there and he loved it and he was looking at it. He was like obsessed with it. We went on a test drive. He's like recording me the whole time, because he hasn't driven manual in forever, else I would have had him drive it. But he was like, "Oh, I really like this car." And I was like, "All right, well, I got the parent approval." They're like, "I support this," because they support me in everything. If I called my mom right now and was like, "I'm gonna go buy another car," she'd be like, "All right, do you need a ride? Like, I'll help you," just they're very supportive in it. So my dad was like, "This is one of my dream cars. If you get it, like, I have to drive it,"
It was awesome. You are one hell of a driver.
Whenever I'm out of town, which is 80% of the month, he gets to drive it whenever, you know, and takes it to work, and he goes on drives with my mom, takes her out on dates. It's really cute. But my parents are my biggest supporters in it, also because they get to enjoy it. So, like, when I'm not home, whatever's in the driveway is theirs to have. My mom's the driver. My dad is, like, the very, nerd, like, we both have the same, like, photographic memory. So anything I read about cars, that's why I've, like, learned so much in the 2.5 to 3 years that I've been in this. Like, I've learned a lot just because I retain all the information that I'm interested in. And so my dad is like a total car nerd, but my mom is the one that actually is applicable into driving, and she can drive. So she would race people in the M2 all the time. And I get DMs sometimes when my name used to be on the M2. They'd be like, "Oh, that was so sick, blah, blah, blah." And I'm at home working. And I'm like, "What's going on?" They're like, "That race, like your M2 is so sick." I'm like, "You just raced my mom and lost." Like, and she's just on her way to work, and it's just like they love it and they have so much fun. And every time I get like a new sponsor, my mom is like jumping up and down, like she's so excited. My dad like totally loves the Porsche. He always is like, "Oh, what are you gonna do next?" They're very like, they're my biggest fans. It's adorable.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VINwiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.